these categories, as we shall mention from the statements of some of the scholars, they are derived from the Quran and the Sunnah. So it's not something that something has innovated or fabricated, rather it is something that is very clear and apparent from the Quran and the Sunnah. And so we'll start with a quotation from Al-Imam Abdul Aziz bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, and he said, وَأَقْسَامُ التَّوْحِيدِ الثَّلَاثَةِ, the types of Tawheed are three, those which we mentioned. He says, بِالْإِسْتِقْرَاءِ وَالنَّظَرِ وَالتَّأَمَّلِ فِي الْآيَاتِ وَالْأَحَادِيثِ. He says that this is known by way of al-istiqra, which is comprehensively surveying and looking at and reflecting upon the verses of the Quran and the Ahadith, and also looking at وَمَا كَانَ عَلَيْهِ أَهْلُ الشِّرْكِ, and looking at what the people of shirk used to be upon. When we bring all of that together, the Shaykh says, اتضح أنها ثلاثة أقسام. It becomes very clear that Tawheed is of three types. اثنان أقر بهما المشركون. Two of them were affirmed by the pagans. Which were those two? Tawheed of Rububiyyah, Tawheed of Al-Asma'i was-Sifat. This is because there are very numerous verses in the Quran where the pagan Arabs, they affirm that Allah is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and that He is the Lord, and that He sends down the rain, and that He gives life and takes life, and all those other things. They clearly affirmed them. They also affirmed, His names, Al-Aziz, and so on and so forth. So this wasn't the point of dispute. The Shaykh then says, وَالثَّالِث جَحَدَهُ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. The third one was the one which the pagans, they disputed. وَقَامَ النِّزَاعُ بَيْنَهُمْ وَبَيْنَ الرُّسُلِ فِي ذَلِكَ. This was the one about which there was dispute, which arose between them and between the messengers. وَالْقِتَالِ وَالْوَلَاءِ وَالْبَرَاءِ وَالْعَدَاوَةِ وَالْبَغْضَاءِ. Right? And so this was the one around which fighting took place, loyalty, disloyalty, enmity, and so on and so forth. These things arose around this particular type of Tawheed, the third type of Tawheed. And we'll finish with a statement from Shaykh Al-Fawzan, حفظه ta'ala, and he likewise says, تقسيم التوحيد إلى هذه الأنواع الثلاثة مأخوذة ومستقرأة من الكتاب والسنة. This division of Tawheed is taken, into these three types, is taken from a comprehensive analysis of the Quran, of the Kitab, of the book, and the Sunnah. وليس تقسيما مبتدعا كما يقوله الجحال والضلال اليوم. It is not a categorization that is innovated, as is said by the ignorant people and the misguided people today. And likewise the Shaykh continues, وليس مصدر هذا التقسيم علم الكلام وقواعد المتكلمين التي هي مصدر عقائد هؤلاء المخذولين الذين يتكلمون بما لا يعرفون ولا من قبيل الرأي أو من قبيل الاصطلاح. So he then says, likewise, this categorization that we have spoken of Tawheed into the two types or the three types, which is basically really the same categorization, he says it's not taken from ilmul kalam. Right, so first of all, it's not an innovation, it's not a bid'ah, because this is the clear meaning found in the texts. Right, that Tawheed has these aspects. So first of all, it's not an innovation. Secondly, he says this taqseem, this division, is not found from ilmul kalam. Ilmul kalam is speculative theology, right? Where we try to figure out what Allah can and cannot be described with by way of our reason, by way of intellect, right? So this is not the source of this division either. It is not ilmul kalam. Nor is it the qawa'id, the principles of the mutakallimin, meaning those who engage in ilmul kalam. And this type of speech, ilmul kalam, using rhetoric and reason and rationale and making the intellect to be the foundation of speech about Allah, His names, His attributes, this is really, it's not the way of the people of the Sunnah, it's the way of these people who are deserted and abandoned and who speak in affairs that they do not know. Nor is it وَلَا مِنْ قَبِيلِ الرَّأِي, nor is it from the this division of Tawheed is neither opinion. It's not opinion either. It's not anybody's opinion. This is not the opinion of a scholar amongst the scholars. Rather, as we established, this meaning is clearly taken from the Quran and the Sunnah. And then he says, أو من قبيل الاصطلاح. Nor is it just something that's been defined by anybody. It's not just a matter of just defining the word. Right? Some people have got together and decided that Tawheed, has three. No, this is something that is very apparent from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And the Shaykh then gives a very quick illustration of proof from the very first chapter in the Quran. So he says, Allah Jalla wa Ala yaqul, Allah the lofty and majestic, He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'een. These opening verses of the Quran in the first chapter in Al-Fatiha comprises the three types of Tawheed. So the Shaykh says, Rabbil Alameen. Rabbil Alameen, the Lord of all the worlds. This is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Then he said in the fourth verse, Iyyaka na'bud, Iyyaka na'bud. You alone do we worship. You alone do we worship. This is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And then he said, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Right, so these are names, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Right, so this now is Tawheed of Allah's names and His attributes. So this is right at the beginning of the Quran. And right at the end of the Quran, in Surah An-Nas, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. Right, so we find the same three categories. بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, Rabb, this is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Malik al-Nas, Malik al-Malik being one of His names. This is Tawheed of al-Asma wa Sifat. And Ilahi al-Nas, this is Tawheed of Uluhiyyah, al-Uluhiyyah. So this is just a quick illustration of two proofs from the very beginning of the Quran and the very end of the Quran, and in between there are many other proofs as well. We now want to finish our discussion by just mentioning one or two statements from some of the early Imams from the era of the Salaf or shortly thereafter. And the purpose behind this is to prove that this understanding of Tawheed is not a bid'ah, it's not an innovation of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, nor is it an innovation of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul-Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, and nor is it an innovation of the contemporary scholars. Rather, we find that this understanding of Tawheed, because it is obviously from the Quran, we find that the Salaf, they clearly spoke of this. And although there are many statements that can be brought, from the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Tabi'een, and their commentary upon the Quran, we want to mention just one or two statements which are very clear and very apparent. And so the first statement here is from Ibn Battah al-Uqbari rahimahullah ta'ala, and he is a great scholar from the 4th century of Islam after Hijrah, and he is the author of the book Al-Ibanatul Kubra. Al-Ibanatul Kubra. It is one of the great and tremendous books on creed. in which the Sheikh, the scholar Ibn Battah, he gathered together evidences and statements from the Salaf and texts on different subjects of creed, on Iman, Al-Qadr, the attributes, the Sifat, and so on and so forth. And so he said within this book, and look at how very clearly here he has outlined the three aspects of Tawheed, right? And this is literally 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, many centuries before Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and many centuries before Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul-Wahhab. So he says, أصل الإيمان بالله الذي يجب على الخلق اعتقاده في إثبات الإيمان في إثبات الإيمان به ثلاثة أشياء. So he says, first of all, the foundation of Iman in Allah, which is obligatory upon the creation to believe in affirmation of Iman, is three things. In affirmation of their Iman in Allah is three things. So meaning that the foundation of Iman, without which there cannot be Iman in Allah, then it is by three things. What are those three things? He says, أحدها, the first of them, أن يعتقد العبد ربانيته, that a servant believes in the Rabbaniyah of Allah. Rabbaniyah is just another word for Rububiyyah, that the servant believes in the Rabbaniyah of Allah. ليكون بذلك مباينا من أهل التعطيل الذي لا يثبتون صانعا. Right, so that he may be different and distinct from the people of rejection, meaning the people of atheism, who do not believe in a maker or a creator. Right, so this is the first aspect of Iman in Allah, that you affirm the Rabbaniyah of Allah, meaning the Rububiyyah of Allah. And by this we separate ourselves from the people of negation and atheism who do not affirm a maker. Right, so this is the first thing. Clearly, this is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Then he says, Ibn Battah rahimahullah, وَالثَّانِي أن يعتقد وحدانيته, that he believes in his wahdaniyah, in his oneness and his uniqueness. And what does he mean by this? He says, ليكون مباينا بذلك من أهل الشرك الذين أقروا بالصانع وأشركوا معه في العبادة غيره. So he says that he believes in the wahdaniyah of Allah, so that he can be different and distinct from the people of shirk, who affirm a maker, and a creator, but who then associate partners with him in worship. So this now is very clearly and explicitly, this is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Very clearly, Ibn Battah has mentioned this. And then thirdly, he says, وَالثالث أن يعتقده موصوفا بالصفات التي لا يجوز إلا أن يكون موصوفا به من العلم والقدرة والحكمة وسائر ما وصف به نفسه في كتابه. So he says, and the third, meaning the third aspect of Iman in Allah, is to believe that He is described with attributes which only He is described of, which is not possible except that He should be described with them, such as knowledge and power and wisdom and all of the other things which He described Himself with in His book. And this clearly is Tawheed al-Asma'i was-Sifat. Right? So this is a statement from Ibn Battah al-Ukbari rahimahullah ta'ala, a scholar from 1,000 years ago, who is speaking of the three aspects of Tawheed. And finally, we'll finish just with one more statement with Imam Al-Tahawi rahimahullah, And he said at the beginning of his creed, At-Tahawiyya, he said, نقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله أن الله واحد لا شريك له ولا شيء مثله ولا شيء يعجزه ولا إله غيره. So he said, we say regarding the Tawheed of Allah, believing by Allah's tawfiq, that Allah is one without any partner. There is nothing like Him. There is nothing that makes, there's nothing that renders Him incapable. There's nothing that can escape Him. And nor is there any deity besides Him. So in these simple statements, Al-Tahawi rahimahullah has mentioned the three aspects of Tawheed. So when he said, أَنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, this is a general statement in which all the aspects of Tawheed are included. أَنَّ اللَّهَ وَاحِدٌ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. Then he said, وَلَا شَيْءٌ مِثْلُهُ, there is nothing which is a likeness of Him. This is Tawheed of Al-Asma'i wa Sifat. This is the Tawheed of Al-Asma'i wa Sifat, of Allah's names and attributes. Because there is nothing which is a likeness to Him in His names and His attributes. Then he said, وَلَا شَيْءٌ يُعْجِزُهُ, there is nothing which can, which escapes Him or which renders Him incapable. Which means Allah has power over all of His creation. Right? So this is Tawheed ar-Rububiyyah. And then finally he said, وَلَا إِلَهٌ غَيْرُهُ, and there's no deity besides Him. There's no deity other than Him, besides Him. So this clearly is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. So here we have two statements from two great scholars in the 4th century. Just by way of example, there are many others that we can bring from even earlier than that to show that this understanding of Tawheed is not innovated, rather it is what is mentioned and necessitated in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the evidences for that are very overwhelming and numerous.